Hey, my name is Mazen El-Hydari, and today I'm going to talk about the 5 gaps hindering your organization's strategy execution. So, I have been able to have the opportunity to work with many CEOs, executives, and VPs in my previous history, and understand that as they develop strategies for the direction of their company and the improvement of their company, a lot of times they only see the good side of it, right? So as we see strategy, we see that we can see enterprise adoption, increased profitability, hyper visibility. Our data intelligence becomes greater. We improve optimized efficiencies. We reduce performance waste, and all of this increases dollars in our pocket, and everybody's happy, right? So a lot of times there's actually a really big disconnect between the execution of that strategy and the idea of the strategy itself. And so, where I've been able to help companies move in the right direction is understand what those gaps are in between strategy and execution and be able to lead them in the right direction. But before we go to that point, it's important to understand what the bad and the ugly is. So, a lot of times when we don't have the proper bridges in place, we see that employees become frustrated or disgruntled, and the processes that they're trying to adopt and become more proficient in, it becomes really hard on them, and they don't really understand where they fit in the role or why they're doing it, and they become very upset, and sometimes the adoption process takes a long time. When the adoption process takes a long time, we end up spending a lot more money in time and wasted resources. And sometimes those projects that we're looking to implement never actually get implemented. And so it's one big fat check that we're writing off to go nowhere. A lot of times they will come to fruition, but it comes at a very, very long term pace. And so another component of this is time. And so the increased time also costs money, and it might not actually be fruitful to perform this adoption within the company if it's taking so long to get there. And lastly, we see that once those employees become disgruntled and it takes a lot of time and they're seeing that they're not performing the way they need to be, we see a high employee turnover rate. And I can't tell you how much I've been working with different companies and different executives, and that's the biggest thing that they complain to me about is that, why are my people leaving? I don't know why. This is such a good idea, and we're actually finally seeing results, but we don't see our people sticking with us through this. Well, that's where I come in and I help companies understand that there is a gap between strategy execution, okay? Where I look at strategy is it's more of the innovative side, right? It's these beautiful ideas that I know you're thinking of that help improve the company, and that's going to make so much money for the company, as well as offer more of a breath of fresh air. It's going to relieve the organization of a lot of bottlenecks. But the acceptance side is where a lot of people do not understand why we're doing what it is we're doing, and without understanding that, they're going to be truly in a deep whirlwind of disgruntled. And a lot of times we see that strategy is more of that innovation side, right? It's your ideas. It's where you come together and you think, hey, we're going to make the company a lot of money, or we're going to reduce a lot of the bottlenecks that we see. But there's a huge gap between having that idea and that innovation and that really great focus for the company, and the gap between accepting what's that change they're going to look like is where we see a lot of ability to improve. So what is that gap? That gap is going to be planning, processes, people, systems, and integration. I'm going to jump right into this because, as we talk about planning, right, it's important to commit to the identity of who you are as a company, understanding your core competencies and your strategic competencies, and where you really need to go. So it's important to have a hyper focus on the significant improvements that you want. Let's try to avoid, groupthink where we think of. Let's try to avoid the abundance of ideas that are good but not necessarily significant. It's important to know where we are, because we'll always have good ideas, but do we necessarily have the capacity to do so is the question that we need to be asking ourselves. And so focusing in on what it is that we want to work on and where we want to improve, and what that rate of return will be. Another really key important piece is organizational engagement, as well as communication, which kind of leads into that steering committee. So making sure that we're constantly communicating to our organization well before the actual implementation is taking place, letting them know the direction of the company, where we're moving and why we're moving in that direction, and then also having a committee set up to where we can have the proper directional focus as we move in through implementation. The next thing is having the right processes in place. So having distinct deliverables and the right metrics. When I think of metrics, I think of the terms lag and lead. When I talk about lag, I'm talking about revenue, profit, quality, customer satisfaction. That's going to be the aftermath of what we put in place as our metrics and how we move to improve those metrics. The lead metrics are going to be what predict the success of the lag. Okay, and so here's where we can influence our team directly to improve revenue, to improve profit, to improve quality, and be able to take us to the next level. The other key important phases here are going to be course correction and phased implementation. So it's important that we move into different phases and we open the floodgates. We don't open the floodgates automatically and let the whole company run wild with the strategy implementation. We want to be able to move in to the right departments, choose a select few groups that will start the process, become engaged and understand where they're going, be able to course correct from that point, and then be able to open it up to more and more and more individuals within the organization. That leads to people. People need to be emotionally engaged, and they need to be held accountable and have a cadence of accountability. So if your employees are engaged and all about the improvement of the company, that's going to be great. And that's where we need to involve our employees well ahead of the time. And then have a capability of accountability, right? We need to understand how we can hold our employees accountable in the way that they'll hold themselves accountable. So if that's creating scoreboards, letting them know where they're at. One key note that I look at and think about is in a basketball game when you're playing, when you're playing in a basketball game and you look up at the scoreboard and you see that you're down 6 points. What do you need to do as a team to move forward and win this game? It's getting back into the green, making those shots, and being able to hold yourself accountable for everything that you're doing. And the next thing is being able to have the right talent in place as we're moving into the right motion of implementation. We need to have the right talent in place to carry our strategy to execution. And that sometimes means optimizing our talent. So if we have certain people in place, that's fine, and they can start there. And if it does not fit and they're not taking the appropriate accountability and they're not engaged appropriately, then it's okay to optimize that and move the right people into place that will continue the success of the project. Systems are very important here as well. So in making sure that we have the right technological infrastructure, the right standards and policies and procedures, having the effective communication and knowledge transfer. So how are we communicating between teams? How are we making sure that you're understanding what it is that needs to be done on this side, and are we having the correct handoffs when they need to be happening? And then a proper training and expectations. So a lot of times I see companies fail to have the appropriate training follow-up, as well as expectations for their individuals to learn and be able to carry on the success of what's going on, because they don't really know what that success looks like. And lastly, it's integration. So within integration, we talk about cultural enablement and excitement. How do we get our employees excited? How do we get them feeling like this is their project? This is what they need to be working on? How do we incorporate within our organization change agents or champions that will, lead the success, that are peers amongst all, and lead the success of this driving change? We also need to have bidirectional feedback. So that plays into our emotionally engaged employees and our steering committee that's helping plan out the direction of this venture. So making sure that we have that bidirectional feedback is very important. And lastly, as we move into our adoption campaign, it's important to measure and optimize where we see that rate of adoption coming into place. If we see a very low rate of adoption, there's an issue there, and we need to understand how we can measure that as well as how we can optimize that to make it more effective as we move forward. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I have another link that I will post in the post below, and I hope to hear from you soon.